Hi folks, welcome back to Stacey Can. Today I am pressure canning black beans. I like to have a variety of beans on hand as we eat them quite a bit in our house, and they're a great item to preserve in kind of an off season of wherever you are. So this is a great item to preserve in the spring. And so that's what we're doing today. It's very simple. What you need is about 5 pounds of black beans will fill 7 quarts or 9 pints. So keep that in mind as you are measuring out your beans and wanting to fill a pressure canner. And you know, add or subtract however much you want for that. And then also some salt. And I'm gonna do, it's basically like a half a teaspoon of salt per pint or a teaspoon of salt per quart. So keep that in mind for your measurements. Salt is optional, you don't have to add it. I like to add a little bit, I just think it gives a little bit more flavor, and then I'm not adding more salt later, because I have found unsalt. But if you have to watch your sodium, you don't have to add the salt. You can also put in some, I don't know, peppercorns if you want. You could put in some, a couple of garlic cloves per quart, or I would only do like maybe 2 per pint just for flavoring purposes. You can do that if you want. So you can season up your beans if you like, but you don't have to, and I'm not going to, because I like to use them for different things. So I kind of just like them as they are, like you would buy a can in the store. So that's what I'm doing. Now, the tools that you need are, you need your ladle, and we need a funnel. We're doing a 1-inch Headspace today. I've got my Headspace tool for that, and a jar lifter. I do have a chopstick here for bubbling. So this is definitely something we're gonna want to bubble with. And I do have a ruler to measure out the water that we're putting in the pressure canner. I've got my lids and my rings, and then I am gonna get a little bit of white vinegar, because I'll put some white vinegar in the canner as well. Just a couple splashes, like 2 to 3 tablespoons of vinegar in the canner. It just kind of keeps it fresher and easier to clean when you're done with pressure canning. And then I've got my jars here and some stock pots to soak the beans. So with all that, let's go ahead and get started. Now, I have been soaking these beans overnight, so I'm not going to do a quick soak method, but I am going to strain them from their soaking water and then give them a rinse. And this is the part where you can pick out any stones and things like that, because it's not a bad idea to pick through your beans. Pour them back into your pot and refill with clean water. And you want about 1 inch of water covering the beans, so when you bring them to a boil, there's enough moisture in here to rehydrate. There are 2 ways to pre-soak your beans prior to putting them in a jar and into the pressure canner. One is the overnight method, which is you put them in a pot or a bowl or whatever, cover them full of water and let them soak for 12 to 18 hours. I think the better the bean, the less time they need to soak. Older the bean, the more time they need to soak, so just keep that in mind. Often the cheaper beans are older, so it's just kind of up to you on that. No shame in what kind of bean you get. The beans are really pretty inexpensive, and they're a great thing to preserve, so you do you on that. The other is a quick soak method, which is cover them, put them in a pot, cover them with water, bring it up to a boil for 2 minutes, cover it, turn the heat off, and set a timer for 1 hour, and that will rehydrate those beans. And you really want to rehydrate the beans prior to canning. It is highly recommended by the USDA, National Center for Food Preservation, as well as extension offices and bog canning book. They all recommend hydrating beans prior to putting in a pressure canner. So don't put them in dry. It's a quality issue, as well as it's a food safety issue too. And I can link more information in the show notes with that if you are interested in learning more about that. I've gone ahead and soaked the beans, covered them. I've got them, I'm bringing them up to a boil, or got them in their pots with water covering them, and I set the heat up to high, and when it comes to a boil, I will set a timer. Got a rolling boil going in this pot, so I've set a timer for 30 minutes. Okay, so I've got my jars heating up in the canner. I was doing that while the beans were boiling. And I am adding the beans. I'm really going just straight for beans at the moment. And we're doing a 1-inch Headspace. That's kind of what you want to do. Try to fill it up with as much bean at first as possible and then add some liquid to it, because you do want to cover the beans with a little bit of liquid. I'm using my chopstick here to bubble around. You definitely want to bubble around all these beans, leave little air pockets, etc. And you want a good seal. That's why we bubble. It's for sealing purposes. And looks like I'm gonna need, yep, I don't know if you can see, I need a little bit more. That was just not quite enough on the bean area here for a 1-inch Headspace. And now I've got it, 1-inch Headspace, and I have a little jar here, a little bowl of white vinegar that I'm using to clean the rims really well. And then I'm also gonna add a 1/2 teaspoon of salt to my mixture. I am not heating the lids. I don't have a tendency to heat the lids when we are pressure canning. I do it for water bath, but not for pressure canning. And just fingertip tight, and then up and over and into the canner it goes. I've got all the jars in the canner. I'm gonna add the lid. I got the lid on the canner. I turn the heat up to high, and I'm waiting for a steady stream of steam. So I have a steady stream of steam going, and I've set the timer for 10 minutes. 10-minute timer's gone up, so I'm gonna go ahead and put on my 10-pound weight for my altitude and elevation. And it's 15 pounds for other altitudes and elevations. So check over off to the side, I'll have it over here, what it should be for your altitude elevation. And it's also down below in the show notes, because I can't remember off the top of my head. If you have a dial gauge, you're gonna wanna watch the dial to get up to your PSI levels that you need it to be at. If you have a weighted gauge like I do, you're gonna wait until you start hearing the rattle, and then you'll set your timer to process the jars. So that's the sound that says we need to turn the heat down a little bit. It's rattling just a little too much. So it's literally letting off steam. And that's what you do for a weighted gauge. Sometimes they have, and this is an upright weighted gauge, sometimes they have the rocker kind, and it'll just, it's really going to town. It'll settle down in just a second. There we go. So if you were above 1,000 feet in altitude, you would want to use a 15-pound weight, but 0 to 1,000 feet, you use a 10-pound weight, which is what I have on here. And but if you have a dial gauge, it's just all off to the side here as to where you want your PSI for your altitude, and it ranges anywhere from 11 to 13 or 15 pounds, depending on your altitude. So I've gone ahead and set the timer for 75 minutes as I'm processing pints. If you're processing quarts, you want to set your timer for 90 minutes. You can combine, if your canner is tall enough, some quarts with pints. If you have a combination, you just need to set the timer for the largest jar, which in this case would be 90 minutes for quarts. So just keep that in mind. The timer has gone off, so I've cut the heat. And when the dial gauge goes down to 0, we'll set another timer to let the food in the jar rest a little bit before taking them out of the canner. The dial gauge is out of 0, so I'm gonna go ahead and take off the weight. And you heard that little bit of a hiss. And then I've set a timer for 10 minutes. We're gonna give the food in the jars a little extra time to settle before taking them out of the canner. 10-minute timer has gone off, so I am taking the lid off. Very carefully open it away from your face, because this will give you a facial you do not want. That is some very hot steam. Now we just carefully take the jars out of the canner here and check them out. Look at how vibrant they are. They look really good. And there's one that's sealed. And this is how we pressure can some black beans. Simple. Check that out. It's another seal. They've been popping like crazy. They have a shelf life of 18 to 24 months. Make sure, give them a good 20 to 24 hours to cool. Overnight is great. And don't touch the lids until then. And make sure to, gently wash the lids when everything's cooled. Wash the jars off before storing and put the date on there. Another seal. Yay! So, black beans are a wonderful, versatile treat. I think they are absolutely delicious. Great as a quick heat up, add it to soup. Do whatever, make refried beans with them if you want. Fantastic. So that's how you do it. Really simple and easy. The recipe for this is down below in the show notes. And while you're down there, please hit like and subscribe. And if you have any questions, comments, suggestions, feedback, concerns, by all means, please reach out to me. I'm on Facebook at Stacey Can Can. You can at me on Instagram and TikTok at Stacey Can Can. My website is www.staceycancan.com. My email is info@staceycancan. My email. I'm also on LinkedIn and Pinterest at Stacey Can Can. I think I have everything. Anyway, all my information is down in the show notes too. So thanks so much for joining me today. Until next time, happy canning.